Hello. Welcome. My name's Matthias. Um, this is me talking about the first episode of Blossoms Shanghai from War- Wong Kar Wai. Apologies. Um, this is a director's name that I mess up the name of a lot for some reason. Um, but he just started releasing his TV show, Blossom Shanghai, here in America. It was originally released in 2023, but now the Criterion Channel is finally porting it over to the US, which is really nice. I just sat down and watched the first episode, and there's kind of a lot to get into with this show. Um, Sorry, I had to get over the fact that I'm talking into a camera. So it's about the Shanghai Stock Exchange. And while that that kind of goes over a little bit over my head for the most part, I can't really tell you the whole history about that. It's essentially a period piece, and it jumps between 1993, I believe, New Year's in 1993, and late 1980s, and there's a lot of different time jumps going on here. The main character is Mr. Bao. If I pronounce these names incorrectly, I'm sorry. I'm not too familiar with pronouncing Chinese, and I believe this is specifically Shanghai dialect in this show. Given that it takes place in Shanghai, makes sense. But the very beginning of it talks about the stock exchange that happened in Shanghai, and when it opened, it wasn't really all that well regulated, and eventually once the stock market kind of opened in the 90s, Shanghai entered into what's called the Roaring 90s, where I think it said it took 100 years for the Dow to get to 1,000 points, but it only took the Shanghai Stock Exchange a year to get to that point. And so it was this really, I guess, big economic boom in Shanghai. And so we follow Mr. Bao, a guy who is, we don't know too much about him in the first episode, but you can kind of understand he's a fairly wealthy individual who is, sorry, I'm looking over at my dog. You're probably going to end up seeing him here in a second. But there he goes. Hi, buddy. But you can tell he's very wealthy. But essentially, the inciting incident is he's going out to his car, and a taxi comes by and tries to murder him. And this is kind of our inciting incident to learn all of these characters and their relationships. We cut back to Uncle Zie. I think that's how you say it. Again, if I mispronounced it, sorry. Also, I'm going to take notes for the next couple episodes. I'm probably going to do these in chunks instead of episode by episode. There's currently 3 episodes out right now in the time of recording this, with the episode 4 coming out Monday. I believe they just released a 3-episode chunk, and I guess they're going to do it weekly at this point. What's up, buddy? Sorry. My dog's trying to get comfortable. This is my dog, Jack. He'll be here a lot. But so we cut back to the late 80s, where Bao meets Uncle Zie, and the good chunk of the episode is their business relationship and how they came into business with each other, and him teaching everything Uncle Zie, is teaching Bao about his business. Sorry, I'm getting distracted petting my dog here. Hello there. What's up? And he's well, you have no money, so everything you borrow puts you at zero, in the negatives, essentially, when you start a business. So, if I lend you $100, and it's the the currency that they use in Shanghai, which I don't know off the top of my head, but essentially it's if I give you $100 and I charge you 20% interest, how much do you need to make? And he goes 120. He goes, no, you need to make 280, because 120 is just essentially gets you out of the negative, and you're left with no money. You still need to pay your expenses and all that. So you essentially need to make double what you have back. So he sends him on this little errand. Something I forgot to talk about. When he's brought into the hospital after his car accident, you can go lay down, bud? Go relax? um, it's I gotta say this overall this show is very beautifully shot. Before we like get into the play-by-play, after the first episode, I do recommend this show. I do recommend you go out and watch it before we kind of get into spoilers. I know he says he gets hit, but that literally happens in the first like 5 minutes, so it's not that big of a spoiler. I don't think there's really anything in this episode I would consider like a huge spoiler per se, but it does set up like a lot of our characters that we're going to be following throughout the series. These are just I think our two main characters that we're following throughout these episodes, and I'm kind of curious to see like where we go further on. As I said, I think this is supposed to be like 30 episodes. We're introduced to a lot of characters. They're not really delved on upon too much, but this isn't a movie; it's a TV show. You can take a lot more time to flesh these guys out. So I'm not too necessarily worried about that, because you meet his like sort of like best friend where he gets like a lot of his like starting money from to like start his business. We meet a girl who runs a restaurant that Mr. Bao is like funding, essentially, called Tokyo Nights. There's a girl who used to own a restaurant called the Golden Phoenix, but she's kind of disappeared at this point. And then we have a couple of other ancillary characters who just kind of help Mr. Bao in his business. They haven't really been delved into deep. They've all kind of got individual scenes. This show is like really fast paced. So once the cops start interrogating people on like who potentially like might have attempted to murder Mr. like Bao, we kind of get introduced to these characters like machine gun style. Because up to that point, I would say that's like about maybe like a little over a third to a halfway through the episode, we start getting introduced to all these characters in very like rapid fire succession, to the point where like Mr. Bao takes a back seat because he's like recovering from his car accident or that attempted murder at that point. But when we are going back to the I was going to talk about the hospital scene a little bit more. Apologies, but it's like, as I said, this very beautifully shot. It's Wong Kar Wai, so it's like I need to look up who the cinematographer is. As I said, I'll probably have notes the next time, just because that I can go a little bit more in depth with. But they're always beautifully shot, especially like that hospital scene. It's very blue, but like the edges of the door frames are almost kind of like an orangish color, and it gives it a really good contrast. It's just really pretty to look at. All the set deck is really nice. Especially when you meet like Uncle Ye, he has like all these books like piled up everywhere. And then like the hotel that they run their business out of, they're in like the English suite, and that looks super nice. There's a scene where Mr. Bao is like getting tailored for his suits, and that's like a really nice sequence. And he's talking about like, these are the types of suits you wear in the winter. These are the types of suits you wear in the winter. Like you need to get your hair cut. Like he essentially is like getting like a makeover once his company gets established. But before I get too far into that, let's jump back to that flashback. my brain's going to be kind of everywhere. But oh well. That's just kind of how I talk about stuff. But he goes, "Hey, we rented out this room. Bring me $6,000 by tomorrow at noon, and if you don't, you'll lose everything. Like you essentially have lost everything." And he's not going to work with him. So Bao goes out and gets like $3,000 from the friend that I talked about. And like that $3,000 was supposed to like go towards his wedding, but he decided to give it to him. And he's like, there's like a really cool scene where he's like running with this like little like tin cookie case thing that you sometimes see, that like the whole meme is like older ladies keep their sewing supplies in it, but there's like a scene where he's like running with it to like make this time frame. It doesn't really talk about where he like gets the other $3,000, but who cares? That's not really what it's about. And so he's like, okay, Uncle Zia is like, take this 6,000, go buy this stock, and you're going to keep it, I think he says, for like 2 weeks, and no matter what, if you lose money or gain money, you're going to sell it all in those 2 weeks. And so he buys it. It's like a vacuum stock. And eventually he just like loses like half of his money doing that. And that's where like the $3,000 for his friend's wedding kind of comes up. But he essentially loses $3,000. And there's like a really cool analogy where it's like, if you walk to the top of the Empire State Building, it takes an hour, but to fall off of the Empire State Building, it only takes 8.8 seconds. And so he has him go get more money, and he's like, okay, meet me here with this money at this time. And, he doesn't meet the time limit, or he does, well, Bao goes to wait for Uncle Zia, and he just doesn't show up. So he waits and he waits and he waits all the way up until like midnight. And he's like, no, I've been watching you for the entire time. We can be business partners. And so that's where we get like the suit scene and all that. But I think everything like that's being set up in this episode, I'm really curious to see where it goes. We get introduced to a character, I think she's just called like the Madam, but she takes over the Golden Phoenix because the girl who owned the Golden Phoenix beforehand kind of like runs off. And she like started this like 6 months ago to like make this new restaurant. You can kind of tell she has like a lot of power and probably knows a lot of people because she was able to get this like restaurant from closed to a soft open in about like 6 months really smoothly. And she's like kind of talking with like a girl who used to work at the Golden Phoenix, and it's like, I want to invite like Mr. Bao, like who does he know? And that's kind of like where we get a little bit more of these character like relationships with people as we kind of like run down the line. And we learn about a club that they wanted to potentially invite Mr. Bao in and go on these stock, but Mr. Bao was like, no, let's not do that. He like kind of refrains, but he kept his mouth shut. And she kind of implies that he did something else to irk the club, and that's potentially why they want him dead. There's not like a whole lot of like theorizing on who potentially killed him. We get like a little stinger at the very end of like, oh, as soon as because Mr. Bao like he's hanging out in this hotel for like a month essentially, laying low and just laying low. And the girl from Tokyo Nights calls him and is like, hey, I think I know who tried to kill you. And he goes there and is like, well, where is he? And she's like, well, I only have a hunch, but I told him to be here at 11 if he wants to see you again. And a taxi is driving by at the very end of the episode. And he goes, oh, I saw the person inside the taxi and realized why he might want to kill me, even though like the thing I did had good intentions, like the mistake that I did had good intentions. And so that is like the very end of the episode. That's where we leave off. So I think it's a very good, cliffhanger to go directly into episode 2. I'm really bad at like ongoing television shows, so I'm glad they dropped the first 3 episodes. As I said, I'll probably wait till 4 comes out if I plan on making more videos on this, which I plan on talking more about movies than TV shows at this point. As you can see, like behind me, this is like all my movies that I own, and there's even more back behind the couch here. And I have an idea for a second video I want to make. It's in that stack of movies right up there. If I had to maybe criticize anything so far, as I said, it's really fast paced, to the point where like it doesn't really let you breathe and kind of like take everything in. But as I said, it's a TV show, so I'm like a little less worried about that because we're gonna have a bunch of episodes to kind of like learn these characters and get a little bit more involved and learn more about them. But then there's also like this transition that happens where like the frame rate cranks really low, and I kind of understand that's a stylized thing. And I'm not too familiar with like Wong Kar Wai. Like obviously I have the world of Wong Kar Wai, and I've watched a few films out of it. Mainly, what was his first? Oh, there's like no list on here, unfortunately. But mainly like In the Mood for Love, his very first movie that he made, and some stuff after that. As I said, not too familiar with him. I had this box set. I've had it for a little bit, and it's one of those ones where it's like it's just kind of been on my shelf, and I just need to sit down and watch all of these. But maybe that's like a later Wong Kar Wai thing, or just like a thing that I'm maybe like a style of his that I'm just not too familiar with. But that's like it's just weird, and it's just I understand it's maybe like a more stylized way to like transition between scenes, because I can't really think of like it happening when like characters are talking or anything like that. Like sometimes a character will go like really low frame rate as they're like walking or something, but other than that, like I don't have like too many problems. Overall, I really enjoyed it. as I said, it's like really fast paced. And me personally, it's like, whoa, I want to like slow down and like actually like kind of understand what's happening. Especially if you have to like, especially since I want to talk and review about it. But I think you get the main gist. If that sounds interesting, if you want to learn, if you want to like, I think it's just going to be kind of like, obviously it's a drama, but a drama about like specifically mid 1990s, like brokers and restaurateurs and like just people with money. I'm really curious to see like where the show goes and like where all these relationships end up. And like, I don't know if it's going to be like people are going to die in this thing. I really have no clue. I know very little about the show. I didn't really hear about it until like Criterion released their trailer about it. And I was like, ooh, Wong Kar Wai. Like I love In the Mood for Love, which I'll probably talk about one of these days, maybe with my girlfriend. But I love like In the Mood for Love. It's like one of the most gorgeous movies I've ever seen. Like it's even referenced in Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is I love as well. I need to sit down and like watch through this day, but I work, I have school, I go to college, but so like a lot of my time is kind of taken up by that. But no, I'm really curious to see where this goes. I'm curious to see like what is set up in the beginning is going to be paid off later. I think it's just like, this just feels like a very introductory episode where we do kind of have a jumping off point at the very end there. It's like, give us a little bit more intrigue and like where all these characters fit into this world, especially the woman who takes over the Golden Phoenix. I think it's, the name of the restaurant literally just left my mind. But the girl who took over the Golden Phoenix, I'm like super curious about her because we don't get a whole lot. You have a feeling she knows a lot more. She knows just knows a lot in general about like Bao. So I'm really curious to see like how she ties into potentially all of this. Like if she had like anything to do with like his attempted murder. I want to learn more about this club. I think it's called like the stock they were going to go on. It's like a 313, I think is the name of the very first episode. As I said, I'll have more notes next time. That way I'm not just like randomly guessing on this, but this is how I just generally talk about like TVs and films. But no, I'm very excited to see where this goes and how these like relationships develop. There's like an interesting scene that happens between like Mr. Bao's like foreign trade broker and like a person who owns like, sorry, I'm trying not to like hit my mic, and a person who owns like a factory, I believe it is, and like she seems really loyal to him, to the point where she's like, would you, if he's like blind, would you give him if he was blind, if Mr. Bao was blind, would you give him your eyes? And he's like, whoa. He's like, it's the new year. I would like to keep my eyes if possible. A little bit of comedy there, but she's like, I'd give my eyes. So she seems loyal. But yeah, the reason that like, we also learned that the reason that the Golden Phoenix, the person who owned the Golden Phoenix left is because she potentially like snitched on Mr. Bao. And that's like potentially why he was like there was like an attempted assassination on him because she like disappears and a couple days later that happens. But she like might have like said something about that, like, I guess kind of like insider trading thing where all of them got together and were going in on the stock. So yeah, I'm really curious to see where all this stuff goes. But yeah, thank you for watching. And I don't know when, how often I'm going to release these. I'm probably just going to release them whenever I feel like. That might be every other couple of days. You might just get a big bunch of, like a big burst of videos and then nothing, no clue. But thank you for watching. I appreciate it. Hopefully you check out Blossoms Shanghai. I do recommend it. Hopefully it stays like this consistency throughout. I'll enjoy it. They're longer episodes. I think they're about like 48 minutes-ish long. You need help, buddy? No? Do you need help? Sorry, my dog's a little older. I don't even know if you can see him right now, but he's a little older, so sometimes he needs help getting up. But no, hopefully it stays the same kind of consistency throughout. I'm really curious if it is 30 episodes long. I'm curious if I can keep this momentum for 30 episodes, how that's gonna like work. Yeah, because they're longer episodes, they're about 50 minutes long, so like 30 episodes seems like a lot. But I'm also not too familiar with like how television really works in China. I don't know if that's like just the norm or if that's like a little unusual just because of like the pedigree of the director. No clue, but maybe I'll do some like more research between now and then to see like not necessarily where the show goes, but kind of like maybe the production. And because this is just like a field that I have very little knowledge of, I'll admit that here. But yeah, again, thank you for watching. Hope you'll catch the next one. Bye bye.